Welcome to Minutes with Mary, special podcast mini-series on the Enneagram. I'm your host, Mary Stelatello, certified Enneagram coach, and I'm joined by co-host Jayson Morris, also certified Enneagram coach and facilitator. We decided to launch this mini-series in celebration of World Enneagram Day on May 25th. The Enneagram has its roots in Greek philosophy, and in the last century, it has gained more exposure as a transformational framework. It offers insights on human nature, supporting self-awareness, team development, and organizational culture. Our aspiration is to share the Enneagram with more leaders, teams, and organizations. Each episode will explore different dimensions of the Enneagram and its value for strengthening your communication skills, navigating conflict, giving and receiving feedback, developing your leadership, building strong teams, and so much more. Let's get started. In today's episode of the Enneagram mini-series, Jayson and I will begin with some of the foundational building blocks of the Enneagram and how we began our individual Enneagram journeys. Jayson, I am so excited to be launching this mini-series with you. I know we have been talking about this since we met almost 18 months ago in the Integrative Enneagram Certification Program. And I was confident that when the time was right, we would launch this, and the time is now.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here and to have a chance to share this fascinating world of the Enneagram with you and with our listeners. And I've been using the Enneagram with teams and leaders around the world for years, but this is the first time I've had a chance to share it more broadly. And I am equally thrilled and have been looking forward to this as well.
I know we kept having calls and you're like, so how's that podcast thing going? I was like, oh, it's still there. It's still there. I'm thinking about it. I'm putting it together. But here we are. It was the time. So let's start with sharing a little bit about ourselves with our listeners. So for listeners, this may be your first episode listening to Minutes with Mary. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you joining us. I am a certified International Coach Federation PCC credentialed coach, and I'm also credentialed in the as an integrative Enneagram practitioner with additional training in Enneagrams for teams. I've spent 30 years in the social and philanthropic sector, supporting individuals and organizations committed to making the world a better place through organizational transformation and leadership. So, Jayson, can you share a little bit about your background and your Enneagram training and experience?
For sure. I'm an executive coach and leadership facilitator, working with leaders and rising talent in the corporate, nonprofit, and philanthropic space all around the world. I'm also PCC certified by ICF, and I hold a couple of Enneagram certifications, one with the Integrative Enneagram Solutions and one with the Chestnut Pace Enneagram Academy, and have also had the chance to study with the Enneagram Prison Project and Enneagram in the Narrative Tradition. And I use the Enneagram with leaders and teams all around the world right now, including some really cool work with some teams and some leaders in educational nonprofits in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, which I will be sharing some more of in one of these podcasts.
So fantastic. I love that you're taking the Enneagram throughout the world, and you've got examples to share with our listeners about that. Okay. So before we talk about our own Enneagram journeys, because it's always an important place to start, it probably would make sense for us to spend a few minutes talking about what it is. So what's the Enneagram and its origin? And when people ask you that, what do you say? Well, how do you respond?
So it's funny that you ask me that because I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram, which is known as the achiever. And us threes are really passionate and maybe a bit obsessed about doing and achieving and eyes on the prize. So I actually don't spend a lot of time talking about the origins of the Enneagram in my work because I'm so passionate about just diving in and helping people understand and make practical use of the tool. But what I do share is that the word Enneagram is Greek. Ennea means 9 and gram means something written or drawn. And it's this fascinating symbol with a circle, a triangle, and this strange 7-sided shape that's been around for thousands of years. And it's traced back to ancient Greece, as well as several religious and spiritual lineages, But the Enneagram and the way that we use it, the Enneagram of personality, as it's called, is about 70 years old. And it's steeped in modern psychology and has influences from spiritual wisdom. And two of the most influential people to create this particular use of the shape are Oscar Ichazo, who was born in Bolivia, and Claudio Naranjo from Chile. And they in turn taught the next generation of Enneagram leaders, including teachers who I've learned from, and I know you've learned from as well: Beatrice Chestnut, Oronio Pace, Russ Hudson, Helen Palmer, Ginger Lapid-Bogda, and many more. So once I share that, I really get into the pragmatic part of it. How is the Enneagram of personality? How does it help us, and what is it? It has 9 points, each of which explain why we behave the way we do. And each of these points describes a type that's differentiated by their core motivation and their deepest fears, as well as their focus of attention. And it really starts to show us what each type thinks about and doesn't think about, what emotions they tend to feel or not feel, what are behaviors that are typical of their style, what are actions that they often take or rarely take. And each of these types has its own distinctive adaptive strategy based on its motivation and worldview, along with the fear. It shows up as strengths and habits and challenges and blind spots. We have all 9 types within us, but we only have one dominant type, one core way of seeing the world that has an outsized influence. I call it a gravitational force that pulls us in a certain direction. And that core type never changes. We can learn to balance it. We can learn to be healthier with it, but that will always be there, sometimes shouting at us, sometimes whispering at us. And the goal here is to find balance, to access other energies and qualities to balance this out.
That is beautiful. Thank you for taking us on that little journey and connecting the dots to the origins and the thinkers of this framework. I love what you said about having all 9 types within us and one dominant type or style having an outside influence. I often like to share with leaders the Enneagram is like a house. There are different rooms in your house, but there's probably one room you really like to hang out in more than others. And so it's an opportunity to explore and get comfortable with your whole house. And there's one other thing that I would like to add just to this overview of the Enneagram, which is the importance of care and using this model or framework for discovery. There can be potential for people to approach the different descriptions and stereotype others by putting them in a box, by being a certain way without deep exploration of who that person really is and listening to how they actually describe themselves. So it's not a box to put people in. Instead, it measures where we are restricted or expanded. And it's like a launch pad more than a box. So I just want to add that piece. I also find it really fascinating to ask people their Enneagram origin story. And I know you've been engaged in the Enneagram for quite some time. How did you come across it? What has your journey been?
I would say that I have 2 Enneagram origin stories. I was first exposed to it during my coaching certification at New Ventures West. And admittedly, it felt overwhelming. And sometimes when I work with people, they share that same feeling. But as I read about the type 3 achiever, I felt so seen. It was like the book that I was reading was mirroring my life trajectory. The struggles, the mental fixations in my head that I somehow thought were unique to me were here on this page. And it was really helpful to me to know that I wasn't alone in some of the struggles and some of the ways that I think or feel. And so it was really healing for me. And I started to see more of this type and its tendencies, its quirks, its characteristics, its strengths showing up in my daily life. And I started to use some of the growth practices that are suggested in the teaching. But I put the tool down in terms of using it as a coach because there was so much, and I was exploring some other coaching modalities, and then I picked it back up a couple years later. And the reason I did was I was working, in addition to coaching, as a philanthropic advisor at a foundation that actually used the Enneagram within the team. And I started to understand more about how my type was very different than my two bosses, who were type sixes, and their boss, who was a type one. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, later in the discussions. But I suddenly had all of this additional context for where there was some tension and challenges. And I like what you said about not putting people in boxes. I talk about it being adding curiosity. It allows us to better understand what might be going on for people. And in this case, it helped me get out of my stories and help me understand a little bit more about how they thought, how they made decisions. And it really helped improve communication and team cohesion. And from there, I was totally hooked. I could see how valuable it was as a tool for leaders and for teams. And so I started bringing it into my executive coaching clients and their teams. And I introduced it at first with some hesitation, but I've now worked with, I would say, several hundred people. And I'm continually amazed at how accurate and how helpful it can be for clients in their own personal development, their professional development, and for teams to strengthen in their team cohesion and communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the piece around, I understood it for myself and how helpful it was for me, but the trepidation to try to use it in coaching was with you there as well until a few years ago as well. So that piece I love, and I love what you've said about how you've seen it be more and more valuable with individuals and leaders and teams. And now there's no hesitation. Yeah, we're going to use that. Of course we are.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
beautiful.
What about you? What's your Enneagram origin story and journey?
It's so funny. When I was thinking about this question, I was like, oh my goodness, this has been a really long time I've known about the Enneagram. My first professional position, which was in 1991, I was the executive director of a childcare center that supported homeless families in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the organization had a partnership with the Center for Action and Contemplation, founded by Richard Rohr. Now, I didn't know at the time that the prominent role that Richard Rohr played in the Enneagram movement. I was new to New Mexico. But the CAC, the Center for Action and Contemplation, provided full-time volunteers for the child care center, which was an incredible gift. We were operating on a shoestring budget. And so to have someone 40 hours a week for free was amazing. And I became friends with one of those volunteers. We both grew up in Chicago. It's always nice to connect with other Midwesterners when I was in New Mexico. And as our relationship developed, she shared with me some of the other components of the internship program. One of the foundations of the program was the use of the Enneagram tool, and all of the volunteers used it, and they explored it throughout their journey as an intern. And at one point, when she was at the center, she just said, "You're such an 8." And I was like, "What?" I had no idea what she was talking about, what she meant by that. And so the Enneagram type 8 is also known as the challenger or the leader or the protector. And so she gave me one of Richard's books at that time. I think it was Experiencing the Enneagram. And from there, I explored the work of other Enneagram scholars and practitioners, so also including Russ Hudson and Dan Riso and Helen Palmer. And it was just a fascination and curiosity for myself. Well, then a few years later, I was selected as a member of an international fellowship program supported by the Kellogg Foundation. And that fellowship program used the Enneagram as well as the individual assessment to support our leadership development. So, since that introduction, it's been a framework I've used to support my own understanding of myself and others. And now more so in coaching and organizational development. And more recently, when I really wanted to sharpen my knowledge after 30 years, my goodness, I took this course offered by Integrative Enneagram Solutions, where we met. And I was totally blown away by what has evolved over these last 30 years. I was kind of dual dimensional instead of multi-dimensional, and where the Enneagram is now. There's so much more it can offer than I had realized. And I just became super motivated to explore how to use it with teams and with organizations as well.
I love that the comment, "You're such an 8," because when we met, I could see that. And I was like, I want to work with her because 8s bring such a beautiful energy. And we'll talk about that. But that stands out. And I remember that very clearly, singling you out and saying, I'm going to follow up with her and we're going to do something together.
Yeah. And, just serendipitously, right? We got partnered up in one of those little mini breakouts, and we had that opportunity to kind of explore each other's styles and backgrounds a little further. So it was a great connection. Thank you, Integrative Enneagram Solutions. Okay. So, Jayson, super easy to geek out on theories, frameworks, but in the work that we both do with leaders, obviously there has to be practical applications for people. And you've hinted about those already, so they can see the value in investing the time and resources. So throughout your journey, how have you seen using the Enneagram to help, one, yourself personally, and also professionally? So starting with you.
For sure. So personally, it's helped me see some of my own strengths that I've taken for granted, as well as help me see some of the challenge areas that I have, but through a lens of more self-compassion and a growth mindset. And I think that those are both important. And I see those with everyone I work with, owning our strengths and being able to stand in them and accept them, and seeing where we have blind spots, where we have challenges. And because they are common challenges for my type, I didn't get so defensive, and I could start to see them more readily and start to work with them. And the awareness is key. And that's one of the most foundational benefits of the Enneagram. It enhances our awareness of self. And so I always say that the power of the Enneagram really shines when you can see the facets of your type showing up in the moment. Mm-hmm. And then right then and there, there's freedom to choose a different way of being and acting in the world. And that's really powerful, both from a personal change standpoint, as well as a leadership development standpoint. And so professionally, I use it with almost all of my coaching clients, as well as with teams. Knowing the Enneagram creates this feeling of almost having a superpower. When we start to get more versed in the 9 types, and there's 27 subtypes, which are subflavors. I won't get into that, but we could totally have a podcast to geek out on that. But you get versed in the 9 types to a point where you feel like you start to know people more deeply from the get-go. Like there's a sense of who this person might be. And again, hearkening back to what you said, it's held loosely. We don't want to restrict people or type them, but there can be a way of starting to sense and understand people at a different depth. So the Enneagram's given me instant empathy for what it's like to be in my client's shoes. And I can coach from there, and I can support them, and I can offer areas for growth and development from a deeper understanding of not just who I am in my limited view, but who others might be. And so I'll coach using the Enneagram. I also bring it to teams to help them strengthen their emotional intelligence and to build more psychological safety within a team, both of which are proven to be integral to individual and team success. What about you? How has it helped you develop personally and professionally?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I love what you said about giving me instant empathy, what it might be like to walk in someone else's shoes. And it just kind of brought me back to one of the things that one of the facilitators of our course said during one of our 20 something hours of time together. Like, you have to fall in love with all of the types. So if you don't, there's work for you to do there. So I just so love the instant empathy for others. Yeah, totally.
Can I just add that's happened for me in working with all 9 types? There has been a moment where I've just fallen in love because I've seen the strengths, I've seen the struggles, and really felt it. And yeah, that is one of the powers of the Enneagram.
And that's a journey for each of us to walk on, because I can say for myself, I didn't start there. Definitely there's sort of this like, right. Oh, these are types that folks that I'm more, have more affinity with. And these are a lot harder for me to kind of resonate and understand. So to this point of developing personally and professionally. Okay, I started my own self-discovery and understanding my core motivations, fears, and drivers. And it really helped me better understand the lens through which I see the world, the way I communicate, my behaviors, and more importantly, how others experience me, like stepping out of the autopilot mode. And more recently with the training that I completed with Integrated in the last several years, it's really helped me support leaders in their discovery of their gifts and their shadows. So, like you had said, Jayson, like owning and celebrating your gifts and not just kind of blowing right past them. And also being able to support teams to recognize the dynamics that are at play that contribute to their success as well as derail their progress. Lastly, I'll offer it's provided me new insights regarding my personal experience relationships, particularly and including my husband. It's been super helpful.
I will echo that. I've done the Enneagram with my partner, and even though we've known each other, we actually met in a coaching program, so we knew a lot about each other. It still provides fascinating insights and explains certain dynamics.
For
so
sure.
Maybe we'll do a couples podcast.
We could. I don't know if I would get my husband to join our podcast. Probably not. But at least we could talk about the couples report that is offered tremendous insight and my journey and being a better partner to my husband. So, and he to me. All right, Jayson. I can't believe it. Time is up and we're just scratching the surface. Of course, in this first episode, as we both know, there is so much more to explore. Really looking forward to continuing the mini-series. In our next episode, we will explore how the Enneagram can provide insights in conversational styles and communication. You won't want to miss it.
Thanks, Mary. I'm super excited to be on this journey with you. And I think we've got lots to talk about, lots of ground we're going to cover.
Fortunately, we have many episodes. What a relief. All right. So before we close out this episode, we have an exciting announcement, listeners. As we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, May 25th is World Enneagram Day. And to celebrate, we want to bring the Enneagram to more people in the world. So we're offering a special Enneagram Day personal discovery promotion. Okay, buckle up. Here's what we got. We're offering access to the IEQ9 Integrative Enneagram Assessment, plus a live 45-minute individual debrief with either Jayson or myself. As we are both certified Enneagram coaches. And wait, there's more. A follow-up 75-minute introduction to the Enneagram workshop. All for, get this, just $250. That's a 50% discount. We're offering this promotion during the month of May, and then the program will return to its regular price at $500. You'll find all of this information in the show notes. It will be valid through May 31st. And so we know that's a lot. If you're not ready to jump in, we're offering a free live webinar on May 22nd to explore some of these components of the Enneagram a bit further. We'll hope that you will join us for one of these opportunities.